Nothing to listen to if we don't record it. Go ahead.
So the MO had secret orders and a mysterious mission. And it said, you are to sail south and find the great southern continent for England. So him and the Endeavour traveled for 19 months.
Wow.
And he couldn't find the island, so he turned the Endeavour to head home. But he wanted to explore an island west of New Zealand on the way
New
back.
Zealand, huh?
Yeah. So this island had a lot of strange plants, and so he ended up naming it Botany Bay. And so when they were sailing home, he almost didn't make it because his boat was getting torn and had holes and stuff. So they sailed up the rest of the coast while Cook was mapping the whole way.
Yeah.
And then they planted a British flag announcing that the whole coast belonged to King George III. But he didn't realize that he had found the Great Southern Continent, which was...
Called
what? Wait, what?
Called what? What's the land called?
Australia?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Australia. And then in 1771, he returned to England and got congratulated and...
Wow, 771. Oh, okay.
And then he set off again looking for the Great Southern Continent, but he got to Antarctica, and there's just ice. And then he finally decided that it would be a waste of time to look for that place. So, and then on his third voyage, he was looking for the Northwest Passage, which led into China.
What?
And then in 1776, the same time of when American independence was declared, he sailed.
So what does ships look like when he went to Northwest Passage? What are the ships he got? What's the names?
Resolution and Discovery.
Ah, Resolution. What do you mean word resolution? Any? Resolution. Not the revolution, right? Resolution.
Forget.
Like a pledge to do something.
Yeah, like determination.
So the resolution.
Are resolved to get this issue resolved. Seriously.
Yeah. And the Discovery.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then.
And discovery. Yeah. Okay.
And then he sailed to New Zealand and then around the Pacific coast of North America. But he couldn't find it.
Why?
So, what?
Why he can't find it?
I don't know.
Nor do I, so don't tease me. So go ahead. Yeah.
But on his way, his ships got worn, and so he went to Hawaii for repairs. And then there they treated him like a god, and because they thought he was. But so they treated him really nice, and they started eating all their foods and stuff. And so when they left, after all the repairs were done and stuff.
Okay, what are the gods called? The name?
I forgot to write it down. Something of happiness.
Yeah, that's true. Ah, you're very good. Peace and happiness.
Peace and happiness.
The Runo.
But after they left, all their ships, one of the ships started breaking down again.
Well, they got into a storm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then they had to go back.
And got in trouble, am I right?
They got in trouble in the storm, and they.
Then let's do a
decided
quick
to return.
review. He was killed, right?
Yeah.
So.
He was killed because he
Yeah.
wasn't a god,
Yeah.
I guess.
Good job. Good job. What is the name? Full name? What is the full name?
Cook.
James Cook. So he's not Captain Hook.
No.
He's
He's-
just Captain Cook.
He's Captain Cook. So it has nothing to do with the Peter Pan.
Nope.
Peter Pan is Hook. So you
Captain-
messed me up.
Captain Hook is Peter Pan.
Exactly.
That's what he
So
said.
I thought it was Captain Cook. Somebody told me it had to do with Peter Pan.
No.
Okay. Okay, the second one.
Oh, sorry.
What? That's how you feel
No.
about it?
Nope.
Okay.
Shut it down real quick.
Okay.
So the next one is the Convict Settlement. So Britain and the Americans were running out of room for the prisoners.
Why?
I guess there was just nowhere to send them, and they were, I don't remember.
Why nowhere to send
There was
them?
just, because their prisons were full. They were
Because
full.
American broke away from them, right? So
Oh,
you
right.
just send America, now they can't.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they were trying to figure out what to do with them, and the first thing they did was put them in what they called hulks.
Yeah.
And they were very nasty, filled with rats and stuff.
Mm.
And many died in here, and it wasn't working for the prisoners. So the English then remembered the New South Wales, and they decided
So
to.
what do you mean?
The Hulks are what they sent them in. They weren't prisons. The Hulks were boats that sent them to their new place. They weren't like.
No, just stay on river. Nowhere to go.
Oh,
They were
I thought
just- they
that's
were
what they
just-
traveled over
They
to
changed
Australia.
shape to be rivers, river prisons.
Oh.
No, they were.
Oh.
Yeah, I think they were broken down ships that were just
Oh, I thought
used
they
to
were-
store a bunch of prisoners in it. It was just gross. So then they they bought more ships and boarded those to New South Wales, and they took the prisoners and supplies to Australia. And there it was very empty. There were no ports and cities, and there were also natives there. How do you pronounce the natives again? Aborigine?
Aborigine.
Aborigines?
You don't know Aborigine?
Nope.
Something like that. Making fun of yourself, right? So you remember very well. Aborigine. Aborigine.
And Arthur Phillip was the governor of the Austrian colony. And he was determined to build this colony so that it would prosper in this area. So he moved, and the area they started off at was it wasn't really working for like planting stuff, so they moved up to a cove with fresh water and flat land.
What's it called?
And they named it Sydney Cove.
Oh, Sydney.
And that's when they began to work on the city, they just began to work on the land. But the city folk and prisoners didn't really get along together.
Why?
I'm
joking.
I don't know. So I think he set out some more convicts or something.
Convicts are prisoners.
Yeah.
Criminal.
And then they began to starve because no ships were coming in. And like 3 years later, they had no fresh supplies.
What?
And
3 years?
Yeah, I think it said 3 years. That's what I have written down.
I don't know, man.
It said 3 years. Let's see. Colony almost started. Almost 3 years later, no English ship had arrived with fresh supplies.
Okay.
And so the prisoners began to steal food and stuff. And then finally, a ship arrived with more food, prisoners, but no instruction for Philip. Because he had planned to go back to England, but he decided to stay and help with arranging things like ships and greeting shiploads, and then also continuing to force the prisoners to keep working. But the prisoners were also realizing how living here was better than in England, because they were actually getting to do work and they were earning land of their own.
Yeah.
And it talked about some people like James Roos who earned 40 acres, and many were thriving there. And the colony was really beginning to prosper. It also talked about squatters, people who had claimed their own land, but they went out in the land and just claimed their own area. And then it started talking about how they needed more women, so they had London send some over
And then in 1792, Philip returned to England, and he left the colony of 4,221 people, and way more than half of those, 3,099, were convicts. And then it ended off saying how they were taking over most of the land from the natives there. So the Aborigines were beginning to shrink. And Arthur Phillip wanted to keep that from happening, so he had, if anybody harmed them, then they would be hung. But they still continued to take over more and more of the land, and it said that not very many remained in Austria. So that's the end of that chapter.
Oh, that's boring.
I know. I feel like both of these chapters kind of had an abrupt ending.
This is a boring book.
Then let's get an exciting book.
Yeah. Get one.
Hey, maybe this chapter would be more exciting.
Okay. Now, just so you know, 25 chapter is a marked chapter. We're going to have a test after that. Okay, so after this week, next week is the time for review. The same time for you guys, for Noah to produce a test for us. Okay? Next week.
Next week or this week?
This week finished 25, so it's coming week. And then that's coming week, we're going to have a test.
Wait, so we're doing review this week?
Yeah, after this week.
So next week we'll start the review.
After today, you're gonna do a review, right?
Oh, okay.
Yes. Oh. Make it sense to you? Yeah. After today, I can have Noah to produce a test. Next week, we're gonna have a test. Okay? That make it sense to you? Okay. Next week, you're gonna be tested, right?
Okay.
So a week from now.
A week from now. Today you finished 25, so so. Okay. Better have better scores this time, because last time is touch the water, not really get wet. Today, this time we're going to literally have a score to stare at you all year long until next time. I'm sorry, not year long.
Wait, what?
Until 5 chapter later. Okay, so there. Okay, you like the score is this high. That means this high. I'm gonna make a board. Yeah, as the one got the worst score, I'm gonna buy ice cream or treat us dinner. That's a punishment.
What if we don't have any money?
Huh? I don't care. You are in debt now.
Gotta buy everyone a $20 meal.
You know? Exactly. At least $20 for me. I'm your honorable teacher. So better do it right. Okay, chapter 25, what happened here? You be careful with the new book, okay? So our books doesn't matter. Your new book, man. It's a new one.
Wait, whose new book?
Your new book. Okay, let's start it. Chapter 25, we're going to do a reading. Evidently, Kayla cannot do that for us, so we have let's start with you two. I know you guys like reading. This gentleman, he's busy with notes, so... Okay, who wants to take the lead? Okay.
That's a Bastille or Bastille.
I have no idea actually,
Bastille.
so...
Bastille, yeah.
I'm sorry. Guys, you guys sit together, give him a book. You two spare a book for him.
The storming
sword.
of Bastille.
Okay, Bastille.
In some ways, the Australian colony.
Get back to her. I use others.
The Australian colony was a little bit like the new United States.
Mm-hmm.
In both of these new places, poor people had a chance to own land even though they weren't noblemen. And in both of these places, men and women could live away from the power of the king. The nation of France watched the American revolt against the English king with fascination. The French even joined in to help the Americans win their freedom. But then they went home to an absolute monarch. Louis, what number is that?
Louis
15th?
Louis
Yeah.
16th.
14.
Louis the 14th.
No, that's 16th.
Yeah, I think 16th, man.
Mm.
Louis,
Grandson.
Louis the 16th, the great great grandson of the Sun King, like his ancestors. Oh, sorry, I read that wrong. Like his ancestors, Louis the 16th claimed that he had a divine right to rule France and to do exactly what he pleased. In the years after the American Revolution, the French decided that their king was wrong. France was an unhappy country.
Mm.
Louis XVI had spent most of France's money to build his huge palace of Versailles and to carry on long wars.
Mm.
Louis XV had lost the 7 Years' War and made France even poorer.
Mm.
Both of these kings had forced the poor people of France to pay more and more taxes,
Mm.
while the rich paid almost nothing.
Mm.
The French thought of themselves as divided into 3 different parts, or estates. Roman Catholic priests were the first estate. They didn't have to pay any taxes because Catholicism
Catholicism.
Catholicism
Mm.
was the official religion.
Do it again. Catholicism.
Catholicism
Mm.
was the official religion of France.
Mm.
The noblemen of France were the second estate. Many of them ruled over huge mansions and farms that had belonged to their families for hundreds of years.
Mm.
They spent months at Versailles with the king and served as his generals, ministers, and ambassadors. Most of them paid no taxes, or very little.
Okay, there's a new novel to read, a classic called the Red and Black. Have you read that? No. Very famous French novel. Basically telling around this times, you know. So, Noah, have you heard that book? Red.
I don't think
Yeah. Okay.
But
Right.
there were.
Mm.
Wait.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I lost my
Mm.
spot. What?
there were about 30,000 people.
Oh. There were about 30,000 people in the second estate, but there are 26 million people in the third estate. All of the merchants, shopkeepers, doctors, farmers, lawyers, judges, wagon drivers, peasants, bakers, tailors, and cobblers of France belong to the third estate. These working people paid taxes on salt, soap, wine, tobacco, and leather. They paid taxes to the church. They paid rent to the noblemen who owned the land where they worked.
Mm.
They paid fees to grind flour, press grapes, or cross bridges. They were poor and they were hungry. France was suffering from the worst wheat crops in hundreds of years, and there was no bread. An Englishman traveling to France was shocked at the hunger of the peasants. They looked, he said, like scarecrows.
Scarecrows.
Meanwhile,
You know what scarecrows means, right?
yeah.
Yikes.
Mm.
Meanwhile, the noblemen went on spending millions on parties, clothes, couches, and gambling. Louis XVI suggested that the second estate start to pay taxes, but the noblemen refused. You see, Louis XVI looked like an absolute monarch, but he had to have the support of the noblemen in the army.
Nobleman. I'm sorry.
Nobleman?
Yeah, nobleman. Yes, great.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, noblemen.
Mm.
And the army to carry out his wishes. And Louis had other problems. His young queen, Mary Antoinette,
I have no idea. Antoinette. Maria
Antoinette.
Antoinette. Okay, that's very interesting.
Yeah.
You never know what French people how to pronounce the things, so I had to know French a little bit. So.
Yeah. Had nothing to do.
Yeah.
So she spent her time dancing at balls, buying expensive dresses, and playing cards.
Mm-hmm.
She had a whole little village and farm built so that she could pretend to be a dairy maid, carrying a milk pail made of priceless porcelain.
Porcelain. What is porcelain,
I
right?
don't know.
Don't like what your toilet's made out of.
Oh, okay.
Precious? Porcelain?
Mm-hmm.
Priceless.
Oh.
Her brother, who had become the Holy Roman Emperor, called her a featherhead.
Hmm.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Because she had a
There's a
featherhead.
picture. There's a picture of her right there.
Where? Oh,
Oh.
where?
We don't have it in our book.
Oh,
That's
she
the
has
newer
head
one.
over. Okay, yeah, sure. That is a featherhead. So.
Marie Antoinette was not a cruel woman. She was a good and careful mother to her 3 children. She was so soft-hearted that she cried when she heard the peasants were starving. But she had no idea of how miserable most French peasants were, or how they felt when she spent millions of
Francs.
francs
Francs is a
Francs.
currency name, like a dollar to American
Oh.
currency. Yeah.
on a party lit entirely by candles or on a simple country dress of priceless fabric. Marie Antoinette became more and more unpopular. The French whispered that she alone had caused French to be so poor.
Antoinette.
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 Oh, okay.
Antoinette. Okay, good. Thank you.
The French whispered that she alone had caused France to be so poor, even though the country had been in debt for long before Marie became queen. When the Declaration of Independence was published in America, it was translated into French and published in France as well. Millions of French people read its words about freedom and equality.
So you see, American inspired the changes of France, right? So.
And then they looked at their own wealth equaling an idle nobleman. Wasn't a shopkeeper or farmer the equal of a lazy aristocrat?
Mm-hmm. Aristocrat. Mm-hmm. That's
What?
perfect. Mm-hmm.
While the French grew more interested in the idea of revolution, France's treasury grew emptier. Once more, Louis XVI tried to make France's noblemen pay taxes. Once more, they refused.
I remember now. Anyway, we read that book we were young, and then in high school, had no idea what France looked like, but they do record it. This process actually, I recall talking about in a small town how this become a problem, you know, together and fighting and stuff like that. So interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And then this young man carry out a love story. So, so anyway, and he took off, serving the Poland's army stuff like that. Huh? No, not. The mess I was not know. So, yeah. Anyway, now history become live in this, people because they write those times, So that's why I encourage you to read some book like that, like War and Peace, where yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
They would only pay a tax, they announced, if representatives from all 3 estates met together and decided that new taxes were necessary. Louis agreed. In May of 1789, the delegates from all over France...
That's a very important year. Let's remember that year. Very interesting year.
What year?
1789. There are many things happened to American as well as France, especially for France. Go ahead.
In May of 1789, delegates from all over France came to Versailles to talk about taxes. Some were
Clergymen.
Clergymen.
Especially like church leadership.
Some were noblemen. Some were merchants, shopkeepers, judges, and lawyers from the 3rd estate. One of those lawyers was named Maximilien de Robespierre.
Yeah, Robespierre. Robespierre. Robespierre in Chinese. We usually have to remember this name, so we're hard because we test it. So this guy's name is Robespierre, means Chinese means, it has this roots, on the ground, some make super fat. You slice like a carrots again. It's called 萝卜丝 in Chinese.
That's what his last name is?
Yeah, Robespierre. That's how I remember it.
That's how I
Robespierre. It's a long name, man. So very difficult in mind.
The members of the Third Estate soon were fed up with the meeting.
Okay, let's spell that name. That is a French got some problem with English. With English, everybody. So.
R.
M-A
Oh,
first.
that one.
M-A-X-I-M.
X-A-X-I. Maximilian.
Maximilian.
How do you spell it? Where is it?
Maximilian.
Maximilian.
The day normally is actually like it's actually it's a nobleman's wording. I'm not sure. Okay, I remember I learned a little bit. Robespierre. Now I was talking about the name of a novel called War and Peace, and one of the main character is Pierre. Pierre. So Robert Pierre. Maximilian. Million is like $1 million, you know. So you can maximum is like, you know, the utmost. Am I the biggest it can go? So 1 million from the Robespierre. Joking. You want to name, you know, you have. Let me teach you a little bit trick. You want to.
Admit her back on.
Oh.
Or someone.
You want to learn, like, remember your code, and I remember numbers, remember words. You just use called the power association, right? When you associate it, or the power repetition, you know, like something you have to read again and again. You know, you read again and again. Whatever you use it, 10 times. Oh yeah, I remember that. And you don't even remember how to spell it come out of your mouth, right? So for the repeating. So. And the second is association, certain things associated. Okay, like our code, right? Certain code, right? You can't really remember, it's pure numbers. But that number have meanings. You know, okay, it's a chapter in the Bible. You know, it's a verse unremembered. It's a dates, you know, so you instantly can break it down, the pattern, or impose a pattern called the power association. Okay, you use that associated with that number, which plain nobody make any meaning to anybody. To you, it is very meaningful. You associate with some very meaningful things, right? So you can send to you. I just did the job for you. Pierre is a character in War of Peace. A War of Peace talking to French with the French history. I got the name. Robespierre. I just don't remember. I told you that guy. The Chinese story, right? So now. Do you think I can not remember that? This guy's name? Fun stories, right? Suddenly recognize, talking to these young people, man, about my past. Oh yeah, War of Peace mentioned, and about the French, about that time. And Napoleon was involved, something like that. Instantly the name jotted down to me, right? So, yeah. And power association. So it become a fun to learn. Rather than just draw, I'm sorry, do it 10 times, I can't even remember, get it beat up yourself. So it's very important to learn how to learn. So, yeah, go ahead. Simple it is actually very powerful process, right? You can benefit the rest of your life. So yeah, go ahead.
The members of the Third Estate soon were fed up with the meeting. They were told that they could only wear black clothes to show that they were less important than the members of the First and Second Estates.
Wow, that's a terrible arrangement, right?
They could only use the side doors of Versailles. When all of the representatives went to church for a special mass, there were only reserved seats for the First and Second Estate members.
So even though all French, they still have a segregation going on, right? By their political standards. So, okay.
The Third Estate were expected to find places wherever they could. And then the king decreed that each estate would meet in a separate room and cast one vote about the proposed taxes. If the First and Second Estates voted together not to pay taxes, the Third Estate couldn't possibly win a vote against them, even though the Third Estate represented most of the people in France.
That's called misrepresentation here, right? So, and it's not a law, by the way. It's just That is how we do it. There's no process, no routine, no agreement, right? This is how we do it. This young king or whatever is very foolish everybody. So he's sitting on the top like something ready to explode, right? So he did all this. Just, are you kidding me? Just lead something. You have a seat on the, the thing that explodes in the passage. They have this, what do they call it? Like storing wines, what they call it?
Wine cellar?
No? Yeah, like wine cellar, but it's bitter, things. Have you seen the movie called
Barrel?
Barrels of what do they call it? Not barrels, but a whiskey, but a
Wine?
pounder. Like weapons.
Oh,
Used to
gunpowder?
Gunpowder, right?
Oh.
When you lead then you lead
I didn't know what you
lead the what called the fuse, right? So boom, right? So
TNT?
yeah, exactly. He just lead the fuse. So.
Yeah.
Think about the contentions as agitation going on with everything stirred up. It's like that thing have potential to explode, right? So he's the leader of the fuse. And he's sitting on top of it.
Yeah.
So he's blew himself up in a sense.
Yeah.
So now why it's important that imagery? It's like you see, he don't think that. Why he don't think that? Because he's signed on a certain mindset. Now, talking about in order to learn to be a good leader, you think about the worst leader, what they do, right? Learn lessons. So it's not the story we want to learn, really lessons, right? So yeah, go ahead.
That was the last straw.
Ah.
The Third Estate renamed the meeting the National Assembly and begged the priests of the First Estate to join them. Many priests who had spent years working in poor towns where the people were starving agreed. Even some of the noblemen agreed to join with the Third Estate. They realized that France would never be a healthy country if most of its people were hungry.
Yeah.
The remaining noblemen ran to Louis and begged him to hold the meeting before the National Assembly took over. So Louis locked the Third Estate out of their meeting room so they couldn't vote.
Cause it's like, okay.
Yeah. So the new National Assembly met on a tennis court and took on an oath called the Tennis Court Oath.
Ah, let's remember that guy.
Tennis court?
Yeah, tennis court oath. Can you believe that? They lock these people up in a building. Who knows, they have food or whatever, accommodation there. As they got to the playground, tennis court those days not like they stay popular. It has to be very special court, right? Only a few people can play tennis. Even have time to play tennis. Here's
What time period is this?
That
seems.
And they made a oath. And this place, you cannot be more foolish than that. Sorry, so like the provoking people to rebel, right? So you understand my point, right? So, just to think about it. These people starving, fighting, and these people are playing tennis.
Yeah.
Huh? So you remember this oath? What it called? Tennis court oath. Okay.
Swearing to make a new constitution for France. Louis recommended them to go back to their own rooms, but they refused to leave. One of the noblemen repeated, "The king has ordered you to go," but the National Assembly shouted back, "We are here by the will of the people, and we will not be dispersed, except at the point of bayonets."
What? And the point of what?
Bayonets.
Bayonets.
Bayonet.
You
Bayonet.
said bayonets.
I said
Bayonets. This is the things like a sword in front of the gun, right? So like basically
Yeah.
ready to kill them. So good.
In Paris, only 12 miles away, word spread of the Third Estate's revolt. The common people of Paris began to arm themselves, ready to support the National Assembly. Louis XVI began to get worried. He was afraid that his French soldiers who belonged to the Third Estate wouldn't fire on the rebellious commoners in Paris. So he ordered the Swiss soldiers who were part of his royal guard to march to Paris and restore order.
Oh, what a mess.
The common people of Paris heard that the soldiers were coming. Die rather than submit, they shouted. But to fight the soldiers, they needed gunpowder. Where could they find some?
Seriously, gunpowder. Hey, remember the opera or the musical you got?
Les Miserables.
Yes, that's what about this. Okay, this time. So.
This is what. This is similar to.
Because that this is event background. So now you're associated with, you just read more. That's what happens. So, yeah, good. Remember the empty chairs, empty table. On the revolution, all my friends gone, right? So,
The Bastille, someone else.
The Bastille!
The Bastille, the royal prison of Paris, was an old fortress with 8 towers and walls 15 feet
Wow.
thick. The mob started to push cannons up and aimed them at the walls. The keeper of the prison decided he'd better surrender. Only 7 prisoners were inside, but the revolutionaries freed them. Took the gunpowder, chopped off the keeper's head, and ran through the streets with it stuck on the edge of a pike.
That's terrible.
Why do people do that?
Yeah.
I just don't get that history with
The
the
mob.
head thing.
It's just to show what they did.
Yeah.
It was July 14th,
Look what we have.
1789.
So there you go. That's the date. July 14. It's the big dates. July 14,
1789.
1789. Bless you. Bless your throat. So don't make trouble for us. We're gonna make it our learning process fun. Okay, we can be serious. We can be fun. So.
Okay.
Sounds good.
The Bastille had fallen, and so had the power of the French king. The fall of the Bastille is still a holiday in France,
July
just
4th.
as July 4th is a holiday in the United States.
Ah, now you remember. How many days difference?
10.
Ah, there we go. How many years difference?
5. I don't know.
I don't know. Why did we just
Both say 5.
That's
Why you
weird.
say it's 5? It's not 5.
That's weird. We both said 5 at the same time.
Yeah, it's not 5.
Yeah.
How many years difference?
I don't know.
From now?
Independence Day starts someday, right? That's why I call it Independence.
1776, so that's like 6,
6.
7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15.
How many?
I don't know. 9.
Wait,
what's
where?
wrong?
When did it
Like
start?
13 years.
When did it start?
difference.
15 years, right?
15?
Yeah.
It started at 1776.
So let's see this, okay? You have a 7089 to... I'm sorry. Yeah. To 70.
Yeah.
Would be 19
17.
years old, right?
So it was
Let's
17,
Yeah.
the American independence started at 1776.
Okay. 89 minus 76. 89 minus 76. 13 years. Right?
Yeah, 13.
Okay. My bad.
Now,
13 years later, right? This
Yeah.
happened. Okay, good.
now the commoners ruled in Paris. Throughout the countryside, peasants revolted, invaded the mansions of the rich, and murdered the hated noblemen of the Second State.
That's just terrible, huh?
Yeah. Some noblemen and clergy, did I say clergy?
Clergyman.
Clergy decided to join the revolt.
Wow.
Others fled the country.
Why? Because they're so terrified. Even if they don't like it, they have to join, right?
Yep.
So.
Louis XVI and his family were put in a carriage and taken to Paris, where they were kept in a palace of Tuileries.
I have no idea.
Tuileries and guarded. The National Assembly also went to Paris and took over the government. Now it was time to write a new French constitution. Like England, France would be a country where the king had to follow the laws. And like America, France would be a country where everyone was equal.
That's a very good start, but it didn't happen very well, right? So let's come to the second portion, which we're going to take time to finish it today so we can move on with our pace. Naomi, can you help us? It's short chapters, so short portions. So.
The Reign of Terror. Imprisoned in Tuileries, a royal family waited to find out what would happen to them. Meanwhile, the National Assembly argued about France's new constitution. The clergy and the well-off members of the Third Estate, doctors, lawyers, and merchants, wanted to put Louis XVI back on the throne as long as the new constitution gave him almost no power. But most of the Third Estate, led by Maximilien de Robespierre, insisted that France would be better off with no king at all. Robespierre made speech after speech trying to convince the whole assembly to get rid of the king. The assembly couldn't quite decide what to do with Louis XVI, but they were sure that they wanted to get rid of the Second Estate. So the assembly declared that there would no longer be titles in France. No Frenchman could be a duke or a baron. Instead, everyone would be given the title citizen. And a month later, the assembly announced that priests would have to be elected by voting like politicians.
You know, that's word citizen is from which culture, which origin? Citizen, the word. It's from Greek culture. We have Greek city people. They call the city people called the citizen. We pronounce the city. So.
Yeah. Now, the First and Second Estates had been outlawed, but many of the France still secretly hoped that the king would return to the throne and rule the old way. Some of these royalists plotted with Louis XVI to sneak the royal family.
It's very important to remember. What is it called? Royalist. Okay, so have you guys read this novel or watched a TV called The Three Musketeers? Right? They fighting with the royalists. So,
oh, really?
So, yeah. Okay. A part of the royalists. I remember now. So. Go ahead.
So they plotted with Louis XVI to sneak the family out of the palace so that they could flee to North France. There, the king would gather royalists around him and try to reconquer his country. Louis, Marie, and children managed to get out of the palace and into a carriage. But as the carriage rattled through a town called Saint Manihold, a man by the side of the road peered in. He recognized the face of the man in the carriage. It was the same face that was the money of France.
On the money.
On the money. Yeah. The man leaped onto the horse, galloped ahead to the next town, and warned the king that he was on his way. A mob assembled and stopped the coach. Louis and his family were taken back to Paris, and they went on waiting. The commander of the Prussian army, sent a message to the National Assembly. Hurt the king or his family, the message warned, and Prussia will invade France and destroy all of Paris. When the people of Paris heard about this threat, they shouted, "The king is a traitor. He has been sending messages to."
So where do you think he heading to when he on escape? I mean, he went to Prussia, right? Prussia, the neighbor nation, you know. Made some arrangement with them, you know. So go ahead.
He has been sending messages to our enemies, begging them to invade his own country. The fading hatred for the king was blown into a hot, angry flame. 20,000 men and women stormed into the palace of Tuileries, killing the king's Swiss guard and dragging the royal family into a dark dungeon called the Temple. No one could escape from the Temple. Encouraged by fiery speeches from Robespierre.
Is that word on the fiery or fairy?
Fiery.
Okay.
The National Assembly decided once and for all that France would be a republic. The assembly renamed itself by the National Convention.
What do you call national, not assembly anymore, changed to be National
Convention.
Yeah. So those are words, same thing, but it's different wording, right? So let's try to differentiate the institution that they make it into. So yeah.
Now France would be governed only by the National Convention, which would be elected by the people. Hatred for the king spread to hatred for everyone who had aristocratic blood. French noblemen who had been part of the revolution started to flee from the country. Those in power wanted nothing to do with the king or the nobility. There was only one remaining fate for the king. Like Charles I, he would have to be executed.
Executed. That's very nice. It's hard for me to pronounce that.
Executed?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Very nice.
On January 21st, 1793,
So
Louis.
that's how many years later now?
I feel like 4.
4 years later. That's a long
1720
time
17
to mourn,
what?
right? Long time.
1793,
Yeah.
Louis XVI was taken out of his cell.
So 4 years unrest, am I right? So remember that? Yeah. Whole nation breaking out already. That our nation? No. Okay.
Don't seek revenge for my death, he called to his sons as he left.
Mm-hmm.
As he marched to the town square at the center of Paris, was a Guillotine.
Guillotine.
What is that?
Skeleton is
Your head's gone.
drop the blade,
it's in a
chops the head off.
A sharp blade that dropped down on the necks of.
relate to something called beheaded in the Bible, actually, right? So who set that thing up? Try to kill some good man.
What?
In the Bible, there was a bad character set this up, try to kill a good man. Turn around, he is being killed by the thing he set up. What's the story? Story of
I know what it is.
story what? Story.
What, they were setting up this kind of thing?
No, it was like a big spike or something. I don't know the name.
Well, that's not
Yeah.
beheading.
It is beheading.
What? What story are you talking about?
Is he hung or no? He's beheaded.
Yeah, and this, he's getting
Gallow.
beheaded.
Gallo, yeah.
Yeah, gallow. That is Haman set up a gallow for
Yeah.
Mordecai.
Is that a beheading?
And then he was punished and his whole family had to do
Exactly,
it.
he was beheaded.
No, a gallo is a big
It's not?
Wasn't it a
spike that
spike?
they make you
Oh.
fall onto and it impales you.
Oh, I had no idea. I thought it was
It's almost worse than
Maybe let's
beheading.
not talk about
Is that right?
Because what they do
So
is they make
it's not
you just
gelatin.
fall on.
Okay, I'm
Nope.
mistaken. I had no idea what gelatin
He was
is.
punished and his whole family had to go on that. That was the
That's
story.
terrible. That kind of thing.
But yeah, he was punished.
Yeah,
Yeah.
guillotine.
Guillotine's very different than that.
Very
The
different.
guillotine is a sharp blade that would drop down on the necks of its victims. That's what it said.
Yeah.
The executioner cut his hair short so that the blade could slice cleanly.
They used to have this.
The guy in the black mask, dude.
Yeah, they
Sorry.
The executioner.
Yeah, executioner. Sorry.
Louis tried to make a speech to the mob.
Hey, that's history, okay? I didn't grow it up.
Yeah, it's just history.
He's off bad fact it is. Go ahead.
But drummers nearby quickly started to beat their drums so that he could not be heard.
Wow.
He was punished forward into the.
Push.
How do you?
Punished forward.
Oh, push. Sorry. How do you pronounce it again?
What?
Guillotine. Just
Guillotine.
Guillotine.
The blade fell. A soldier held up his head and shouted, "Long live the Republic!"
No more the well, they call it long live the king.
Is that in that movie, Peabody in German?
Yeah.
No, it's in
That-
Star Wars. Long live the. Just kidding.
That's terrible. Huh? Yeah.
Anyway, people ran forward and soaked up the blood with handkerchiefs
What?
and bits of cloth so that they could have the souvenirs. Ew. of this great
What?
event.
What is
The
crazy,
king
huh?
was dead, and the French Republic was in trouble. Other European countries watched with horror, hoped that the madness would not spread.
Absolutely was so afraid. That's why later on have the war with Russia. That's why the War and Peace movie the story came out. Yeah. Go ahead.
Soon England, the Netherlands, and Spain declared war on France.
Mm-hmm.
In the west of France, many peasants who were loyal Catholics rose up and rebelled against the national
That's crazy.
convention.
You remember England and the Spaniard enemies? Because Spaniards, the Catholic, England, Protestant, right? They used to fight each other all the time. Now they're so afraid they're going to line up against this nation, which is Catholic. Usually, French and the Spaniard are always acting together against England, right? So this whole event changed everything for European politics. So go ahead. Mm-hmm.
They rebelled against the national convention and its treatment of the Catholic priests.
Yeah.
The National Convention was afraid that the Republic would fall, so it formed a new committee called the Committee of Public Safety and put Maximilien de Robespierre at its head.
That's why Les Miserables is so powerful, because the author wrote that story and made the play in public squares, just in the things when this thing wrapped up. So the Catholic priest is a word picture from a bad person, right? So, but in the beginning of the story, it's saying about this wonderful, virtuous clergyman or priest help a guy who was prisoner, typical of this kind of people, right? In the prison, mistreated, right? In that society. So it's not just casually a tragic helping story. It's in the background. Now it adds more texture to it, but more power to it, So you think about the Catholic used to be in the whole thing was a bad person, right? A prisoner have every way to go on, wedge out his rage with his whatever they do, which had happened here. And this author come around and said, I want to heal the society. I want to bring a different message. And he used a play, uses a novel to do that. He just described some character totally out of the culture of the day, right? So as a common impression of man's mind about certain people, right? No more a Catholic priest is a worst evil person anymore, No more prisoner. It's just he had to seek revenge, had to seek a revolution, kill people. He's on a course of repentance and try to help people, right? So making sense to you? It's so powerful. So anyway, it's definitely a what's the word? A correction, not a correction, almost a rebuke to the mob spirit that is spreading around. So making sense to you? So yeah, and people write like that, they expect to be killed. Yeah, that's the courage we have here, So and he ready to be killed. Have you read that guy called what is his name? You need to read his life story. He's a very passionate person, very a poet, author. But a very passionate person, he really wanted to care about the people, care about the nation, and then go on. He did those things. So there's, everything have flaws, but this one is very good, Now today we read it without those contests. We just read it as very unique story, and I love story, whatever. But in those days, love story is only a vehicle, right? So actually the message hidden in those characters, so lots of they'll give you a new eye to look at that novel, that story. So when history is bring forth, right? So contextualize. That's a power of history. History, exactly what those things are actually talking about. So anyway, go ahead.
Robespierre had all the peasants who had rebelled in the west of France arrested and put to death. And he began to send everyone who might have sympathy for noblemen, clergy, or kings to the guillotine.
Yeah.
Wait.
Guilty.
Wow.
Guilty.
The reign of terror had begun. And the National Convention passed a new law called the Law of Suspected Persons.
Suspect person.
Under this law, anyone who was against the revolution, or who even seemed not too enthusiastic about it, had to be executed. The first person convicted under this law was Marie Antoinette.
Yeah.
On October 16th, 9 months after her husband's death, Marie Antoinette was driven into the... Why do I keep forgetting it?
Guillotine.
Guillotine.
Yeah, repeat it 3 times. You don't.
Guillotine.
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 Guillotine. Not guillotine, not
nice.
guillotine.
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 Don't even look at the word.
Thank
It's just
you.
guillotine.
He was telling me guillotine.
not guillotine.
I messed up with the gluten, the word.
Gluten.
Gluten. Yes.
Guillotine.
Messed up already.
We're not good with English, okay?
So guillotine in a rough farm port
Guillotine.
called Tumbril.
Tamburio.
She wore a white gown, and she was only 37. But the executioner held up her head. Everyone could see her hair had turned pure white.
Ah.
Marie, I feel like we just read that. Marie Antoinette was not the last of Robespierre's victims.
I read that like 5 times.
You did? I'm sorry.
That's fine.
He accused thousands of people of plotting against the Republic. Men, women, peasants, old people, even children. In the towns all over France, guillotines fell. Old women would sit beside the guillotines, knitting socks for soldiers, chatting and laughing with each other, and occasionally cheering as the guillotine fell.
Kidding me?
If blood sprayed on the knitting, wow, so much better. Oh, the blood would fill the soldiers with revolutionary fire.
That's crazy,
The
huh?
guillotine, the guillotine was claiming both the innocent and the guilty alike, wrote Helen Williams, an English citizen in France who was arrested and then released. The gutters seemed to stream with blood. But the time that by the time the 16,000 French citizens had been guillotined, the National Convention started to worry about the
Now you turn around the corner, okay? So.
He had too much power. He had grown suspicious of everyone, even his own friends. Members began to whisper that it was time to remove this man before he became a dictator, even worse than Louis XVI.
They were so afraid of him.
Robespierre got wind of the convention's doubts. He stormed before a meeting of the convention, yelling that a plot was being formed against him. I know who is set against me, he shouted. They too will be rooted out and sent to the guillotine. The National Convention did not like to be threatened. Guillotine. The next day, one member after another stood up and made a public speech commending Robespierre. Condemning Robespierre. Robespierre, unable to believe that he was hearing, sagged into a chair and grabbed his head with both hands. He was arrested and dragged away into the guillotine, where so many other soldiers had died. The reign of terror was over. France had no more king, no more Robespierre, and no more religious.
Yep, actually not true. Another 2 parties still contain certain
That was a
policy.
lot of information.
A lot of bad information. Traumatic information. Review. Started with Louis XVI's foolish assembly. I'm doing the review now.
Oh, I thought you were
I'm
saying.
joking. So then caused the whole revolution started, am I? In which date? The Bastille, the prison fall down.
1789?
Which date? I said
No.
July.
Oh, I have the
14.
hardest times remembering.
Yeah, there you go. That's important. See, that's marked it. And it goes on. Robespierre came around. Basically, the next scene is basically on the terror of that time. Right? So then eventually got himself killed. So that's it. So not too much story to it, actually. So it's too much details. Well, with that, wrap it up. And we remember that one of the bloodiest day ever happened, and happened in the center of world polished, well-organized culture, right? So religion was there, king was there, but foolish character as well, right? So yeah, that's concluded our history today. I'm eager to